the thing that makes Navy unique and something that you, as someone who has experience talking to 16 and 17-year-olds about what to expect or what the Naval Academy is all about, what to expect when you're there, you highlighted this part, but like people do think of it as a military academy more so than they do as a school, and they think about the expectation and the weight that
Hmm.
is within that, but then also it's not a, or again, like you're setting down this path of not just 4 years, then go on and get a professional life job, right? You're going through, you have this path that is a little bit more formatted, but also with the military, kind of components weighing on you in a way that's just unique.
Yeah.
And I think that's awesome. I think that's such a positive thing. But I think for you, as you talk about that to the kids that you're working with or talking to on the recruiting front, these 16 and 17-year-olds, or even the parents, like, how do you articulate that message of like, hey, I'm not just coming to a 4-year school where I'm going to go on and get a real job, quote unquote, like all of us rowers say, right? Us coaches got to get real jobs too. But like where I'm going to get a professional job, I'm going
Yeah.
and I'm now committing to service. How do
Yeah.
you, in those conversations, when that does come up, because I'm sure it does, how do you talk about that?
Uh, that's it comes up every time. Every single one, every single recruit you talk to, it comes up. Um, I approach it from, well, I guess I approach the whole recruiting process very much from a standpoint of like, this is your thing. This is not my thing. I did my 4 years. I made my choice. This is your thing. So I'm just here to try and, yeah, we want guys and girls to come to the Naval Academy, and we want to get the best recruits that we can, but it's only like it's the thing you're doing. So I just want to be able to educate. And that's how I view it, is those early conversations. It's just educating on the recruiting process. It's like, take the Navy hat off, take whatever hat off, and make sure that the kid and the parents understand what is actually happening right now, and what is kind of the general timeline of recruiting, and what are the things, as I like to put it, is like, put you in the driver's seat, right, and of your recruiting process. And I think sometimes that stuff just gets kind of glossed over. Not that sounds negative, but we just kind of get right into the sales pitch, and it's so hard to not do that, because like they're talking to their schools, and some of the questions right off the bat are like, what's this like at Navy, or what's Navy do for this? And I love talking Navy, but I want to make sure that the kid and the recruit and the parents understand recruiting process in general. And I think that if you can just kind of get that sorted at the beginning, um, there's almost just an ease that comes with that, just kind of understanding the timeline a little more. But then through all of that, the Navy stuff comes up, and it's just education. I did not grow up wanting to be in the military. I did not, my grandfather was in the Navy, but that was prior to me even being born. So I don't have any kind of overlap with him in his service. It was just one of those things where I would see the pictures of when he was in the Navy, and I thought that was cool. He had some good stories, and I love that stuff. But I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, kind of thing. I didn't know what any of that meant. And it was through just learning about it. And I think that's where I try to approach it with people as well, is I don't expect anyone to know. And there are people out there that have parents that are graduates or served, and they understand. There are recruits every year that are just, they know more about the Naval Academy than I ever could, because they've just really want to do it. And that's awesome. I love that. But a lot of it is just education. And I think the biggest misconception is that it's just so drastically different. And there are differences, don't get me wrong, but I studied engineering. Like, I took the same classes that any engineering major took at other universities. I got a Bachelor of Science. It's, the same degree. It just has a different name on it. And, that's where there's a lot of similarities that I think sometimes get kind of lost in just military academy. It's just things like, oh, everything's different. But it's pretty similar in that sense. And then I think it's just kind of educating on what happens afterwards. And that's a tough thing for everyone to kind of conceptualize at 16, 17 years old. And I think that's where there is a huge opportunity for the education, just to make sure people understand, like you graduate, you're going to have to get a job at some point, hopefully, become a contributing member to society and whatever it may be. But that's kind of understanding what those things are from the Naval Academy is more important than just the idea of being in the military. It's service. It's, you can go, I guess we get into this, like a little bit of like what happens. And this is where I educate them on, I try to help them understand what the opportunities are. So you graduate from Navy and it's 4 years college education for free, paid for, and you even get, a stipend as you're here. And then you have a guaranteed job. And the crazy thing is that when I went up to Yale and was coaching up there, and I started to have conversations with those guys, and I never thought about the stress while being a college student of trying to figure out what you were going to do next. I didn't personally experience it. I just knew I'm graduating and the next day I have a job. Like, what that looks like, I don't know. There was some stress with that because it was like new, but I was going to have a paycheck. I was going to have a place to go. There was going to be work for me. And so I just hadn't thought about that from that angle until I was coaching at Yale and working with those guys, and just the stress that added to their life was crazy sometimes at certain times of year, trying to secure an internship or secure a job post-graduation. And so that was kind of the nice thing. You graduate from Navy and next day you have a job, and and kind of depending on where you get stationed as a 23-year-old, you're making $70,000. Like, it's not a bad life. In a lot of ways, if you look at it in those kind of terms. And then you have to do 5 years. And so that 5-year mark, this is what I talk to parents and kids. And I think parents, this resonates a little bit more with parents. It's like 5-year mark. If you make the decision you want to stay in or get out, but at that point you're 28 years old and you've made a couple promotions, you've had some real world experience, probably been on a deployment or two, and you're making probably the equivalent, depending on where you are and with the tax benefits, of right around 6 figures, $100,000 as a 28-year-old with some really cool experience. And probably if you want to stay in, there's some bonus promote, on the horizon to stay in or to get out. And those are kind of the things that I think some people just don't even realize what comes with serving. Sometimes it's talked about as, free college, and then you pay back with time. But yeah, you get paid during that. It's not like you're working for free during that time. You are, you're an officer in the Navy or the Marine Corps, and doing some pretty cool stuff. And I think that's pretty exciting to me. And some people that really resonates with, some people it doesn't. And that also is totally fine and acceptable. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's also pretty cool in the sense that there's just a ton of opportunity there. And I think that's the big thing I'm trying to educate guys on and girls on and families on. It's more than just free college and then now you're in the military. Like, what that military picture looks like can take so many different forms now. And it's expanding, and the opportunities that lay beyond that are awesome. That's something too. I don't know. I'm just like having these thoughts. I just could keep going. But the other thing I try to educate people on, and it's even harder to think about when you're 17, is, say you get out that 5-year mark, 28, 29, 30. It's hard for a 17, 16, 17-year-old to think about 30-year-old them, right? And I did not think about it at all. And I'm just very fortunate. But when I got out of the Navy, I did 7 years total. When I got out, kind of like thought about coaching, but I wasn't sure what I want to do. There's kind of like these pressures to, go to business school or go back to school or, all these different things. And the cool thing is that every big company, every Wall Street company, every Fortune 500, every major industry has programs specifically designed for helping junior military officers transition. And they are seeking you out no matter what. They want 29, 28-year-old, lieutenant or captain from the Marine Corps to come to their company, and they will put you in a leadership program. They'll put you in some development, program to get you up to speed on what, specific thing they have. But what they're getting out of it is you're coming in there with potentially at least 5 years of real world leadership experience. And that's takes a form of many things, like on my first ship, I spent half the time as the ordnance and gunnery officer, and I was in charge of the ship's at 24 years old, I was in charge of the ship's entire ammunition supply, which is millions and millions of dollars. And you're off by one and I'm fired, like that's real world. And like the failure was not an option. So it's experiences like that. And, buddies in the Marine Corps that are deploying at the time overseas, and like failure is not an option because like the mission has to succeed. And so those experiences you can't get anywhere else. And that's what companies are looking for at another level, that you go to any other university and it's great, but you just don't have that at 24. And that's why they have these programs set up. And I think that's another piece to educate people on. And that's kind of the parents that resonates more with, because they've been through that phase in life, or they are, they're older, so they understand the bigger picture. It's hard to get that through to a 17-year-old. I definitely wasn't. Maybe someone did tell me that, but I didn't retain it. I'm happy that I benefited from it. Ultimately, I chose coaching. But the cool thing too was I remember going through that process and just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And so I just started to look up companies that I thought were cool. I thought, oh, Patagonia is a sick company. Like it'd be fun to work in the outdoor industry. Like, what's that look like? So I just looked up Naval Academy grads that had or were working at Patagonia and just started cold emailing people. And most of them, I mean, every one of them I ended up talking to, but most of them I was on the phone with them the next day. And they were just like, oh, you were a varsity athlete at the Naval Academy. Like, I don't need to know anything else more, but like, let's talk. And that was like the coolest thing. And everywhere's got networks, and everywhere's got, amazing alumni. But I think those are the things that not a lot of people think about coming from the Naval Academy. I think everyone talks about different alumni networks and this or that, or getting into finance or getting into this industry from, there's a strong, this network from this X university and this industry. But everyone's just like, oh, you go to Navy, you go to Army, you go to West Point, like you're going into the military. But there's a whole life after that I didn't realize. And that's something I try to educate people on, just to know like everything that you get from this place.